I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Finance and Auxiliary Services Committee. Today is Monday, April 8th, and it is 5:32 p.m. There is a possibility that a quorum of the full membership of the Board of Education may be in attendance at committee meetings. There will be no full board action taken at any board committee meeting. Only members of the committee may vote on any item on the agenda. A live broadcast will be streamed on the school district's YouTube page. To watch the recorded meeting, please visit our School District of Menominee Falls YouTube site. The meeting is being held in Village Hall in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, West 156, North 8480 Pilgrim Road, Village Hall Upper Level Conference Room 3344/45. Can I ask if the meeting was properly posted?
Yes, it was.
Great, thank you. We did get minutes for the meeting that was on March 18th. Can we get, we need to approve those minutes. Can I get somebody to move that forward?
I'll motion.
A motion by Ms. Holzman. Can I get a second?
A second?
And seconded by Ms. Deuce. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, moving on to item 3, discussion items. We do have one item for discussion. CE and Recreation Facilities Project, Riverside Facilities Project, Fund 39 debt defeasance. And I will turn it over to Caitlin to get us started.
All right, thank you everybody for joining tonight. We have a full house, which is exciting. We have a lot of things to go over tonight. So I will get us kicked off with some context and background information, but before I do so, we'll go around the room and do introductions. So if you could state your name and your title, where you're from, because we do have some outside guests joining us tonight too. So I'll start. My name is Caitlin Windler. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations in Menominee Falls School District.
Matt Clark, Finance Manager.
Jennifer Grant, School Board Member.
Joel Woppert, School Board Member.
Sarah Redden, School Board.
Jason Husline, Director of Community Education and Recreation.
Sean Holzman, School Board Member.
We have our online guest.
Mr. Eric Cass, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you very much, and thank you for the flexibility. Actually, the irony, I live in Brookfield, but I'm in Green Bay right now, so I'd be much closer to come to your meeting, but unfortunately I'm here tonight, so thank you for the flexibility. Eric Cass, Director of Public Finance with PMA Securities.
David Gornell, Superintendent of Schools. And just so everybody on the recording and online here, Scott Walter just walked in, Riverside Principal.
Nina Christensen, Board Member.
Joel Everett, Maintenance Manager.
Chris Carlton, Director of Facilities.
Chris Coggins, Project Executive with DGS Construction Services.
Teresa Wadzinski with EUA. We're an architecture and engineering company here in Milwaukee, and I am the Learning Environments Studio Director.
Great, thank you everybody for joining. So I will start with a significant portion of background, laying the foundation for tonight's presentation, and then we'll go through the agenda, and then we'll go through, kick it off to Jason Husline, our Director of CE and Rec, who will get us started on the context and background of community education and rec. So starting off with background, we, let's see, okay, so we've had a number of prior discussions over the course of actually years, which are very helpful in why this is all being presented together here tonight. So over a year ago, we had preliminary discussions with our Board Finance Committee regarding debt defeasance. And defeasance is essentially a prepayment of debt. So we'll talk through that towards the end of our presentation about our recommendation for our debt defeasance. Throughout these discussions from the prior year, we had Mr. Eric Katz from PMA join us, and we discussed the proactive position the board put us in with our Fund 39 levies in order to set us up for future debt defeasance for debt payments. This long-term planning approach has enabled us to have this discussion here tonight. And at this time, a year ago, we were entering into the first year of a state biennial budget. So the state works on a 2-year budget cycle, and going into the first year, so in the spring, leading into the new state budget, there are many key factors of our overall revenue and our overall aid that are unknown at the time. And those variables are significant and could swing our overall revenue and our aid, and therefore levies, in a big way, one way or the other. So we made the decision to pause that defeasance conversation until this spring, when we would be in the middle of a state biennial budget. So we are wrapping up the first fiscal year, the 23-24 fiscal year, moving into the 24-25 fiscal year and planning for that upcoming year. And we have known factors. There are a lot more variables that we know at this point in time that affect our overall revenue and our aid, and therefore our levy, that enable us to present information here tonight with much more certainty than we had a year ago at this time. So we're in an advantageous position to explain and recommend a debt defeasance recommendation for tonight that sets our district up for, again, future success. Long-term planning is we're always focused on, and Mr. Eric Casper will be assisting in presenting that debt defeasance tonight and how that mechanism works to reduce future interest payments. We have really exciting information to present, a large interest savings for our taxpayers by making this debt defeasance. Simultaneously, we've been analyzing the growth with our community education and recreation programming and the caps that we are at in terms of our facilities within our CE and Rec building. Our participation is now exceeded pre-pandemic levels, which is awesome and exciting, but our space is limited and we've kind of reached that capacity within our space. At the same time, Riverside Elementary is seeing similar growth and similar facility limitations in that we're, again, maxed at how many students we can actually fit within our Riverside building. And in the next few years, Riverside is projected to increase by 2 additional sections. So we'll talk through how that looks for 24-25, and then the future, the next 2 school years after that as well with facility opportunities.
I can try to come.
She's here. Oh, I just wanna turn this off. So bringing it all together, the timing of our debt defeasance pairs very nicely with our facility projects in terms of the tax levy and the overall mill rate, which will be presented in full transparency that are in line with recent trends and actually are continuing to decrease mill rate. So we'll show how all of this fits together, which is why it's all being presented in one big large meeting, because these 3 big pieces function very well in conjunction with each other tonight. So with that, I will head to the agenda, which kind of went backwards. So we'll start with our community ed and recreation history, growth and facility opportunities. Moving into Riverside's elementary growth and facility opportunities. Talking about security enhancements and how those 2 buildings function together since they really share one larger facility. And then looking at the cost breakdown and funding sources. We will dig into the tax impact and talk about why now makes sense when we discuss our Fund 39 debt defeasance. Eric Katz is joining us virtually from PMA. He's actually presenting in a few other school districts tonight. So Eric's jumping off between 6:30 and 7 to do another presentation. If his part comes up during that time, we'll work with punches and work with our timeline and take questions and things like that. So he will be jumping off and jumping back on. So thanks, Eric, for your flexibility tonight too. With no further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Husline, Community Ed and Recreation Director, Mr. Jason Husline.
Thank you, and thanks for allowing me to speak this evening. Just to start off, I'll be speaking tonight not necessarily about CE and Rec programming district-wide, because we run programs in all 6 buildings as well as the community center. I'll really be focusing tonight on the community center as well as gyms throughout the district. So just wanted to open that up by saying that. There's a nice picture of the community and rec center, or the community center, from 1996 when it was built. And before we talk about current programming and talk about some of the challenges that we're facing and where we might want to go, I think it's important to just kind of give a brief history of why the community center was built, when it was built, and things like that. So, community center was actually built in 1995-96, opened up in 1996, and it was really a joint project between the school board and the village board. At the time, there was a need in the village of Menomonee Falls to create a permanent space for the Reineken Club, which is the senior club in Menomonee Falls, because they would bounce from location to location depending on what school was shut down at that time, or I think they might have also been in some churches. So it was really, that was one of the driving forces behind building this community center. Another item that was attached to it is Riverside School, which the community center is attached to Riverside School, did not have a gymnasium. So a gym was also added to the community center Riverside that would be shared use between the community center and Riverside. When the community center was built in 1996 to today, programming has grown tremendously. I'm not going to get into the weeds necessarily too much of numbers and the number of programs, but what I can tell you is in 1996, the building was used for the Ironican Club, which was the social senior club that met twice a month. It was used for school board meetings, village board meetings at the time. The gym was used maybe 1 or 2 nights a week, and the meal site, the Waukesha County meal site was there too. To today, where it's used quite a bit more, and I'll get into that in a little bit here. Over the time, because of how the community center is attached to the Riverside, and we've seen increased programming, but while we've seen increased programming, we've seen a decrease in what I would call programmable space. So some of the challenges with the design of the building, first of all, I'll kind of talk about the gym. I mean, it's attached, and so we don't utilize the gym during the day. It's strictly used for Riverside FI classes. So that really limits gym access during the day. But some other things that have come up over the years is some of the spaces within the community center have been converted into what I would call educational spaces or school spaces. So 2 examples that I'm showing up on the slides there are the Quest program. When Hiawatha building, which is where district office used to be located, and that's where the Quest program used to be located as well. When that building closed, Quest needed a home. So they came to the community center, they occupy one of the rooms in our building. And if you look on the picture at the right there, they're in a room, if you come into our building, I think most of you have been in our building, but they're at the end of the hall. The challenge that creates, as well as with Riverside students, which I'll touch on, is just safety and security of students. There's interactions, I guess, commingling between the student body and the general community. So it's not as secured, the classroom is secured, but for them to get from the front door to the room, when they're using restrooms, when they're on their break, it's just not secure. Same is true with the Riverside music classes, which at some point, I believe it was probably 2016, 2017, around there, music classes moved from Riverside to our lower level in the community center. And the picture on the left here is our lower level. You can't see the music rooms, but they're on the right-hand side. All the way at the end of that hall is what I would call our group exercise room. We refer to it as our fitness room a lot of times. I hesitate to use fitness because it's not an open gym where we have treadmills and bikes and things like that, but our fitness group exercise room is at the end of that hall. So once again, the challenge there is, as kids are walking from Riverside School to get over to the lower level in the community center, they're now entering an unsecured building. And then as community members are going to class, because we do have classes during the day, there's that potential for interaction and so forth. Once again, classrooms kept locked when the kids are in there, but obviously things come up, bathroom needs and so on. So it's just some of those design issues have created some security challenges over the year. Plus, with the loss of the room for Quest and the loss of the room for music, which is actually, I call 2 rooms because it's one large room that can be divided into 2, you can see that we've lost some programmable space as well. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of talk a little bit about the gym specifically, and then I'll talk a little bit about our group exercise room, and then just community center use in general. So on this slide here, as I had mentioned already, some of the challenges with the gym being attached to the community center is it really limits access to the gym for the community. It also, as students are waiting to get into gym class, there's a little vestibule between the 2 buildings where the students line up to get into gym class. That creates that safety concern, safety issue. I need to be clear, we haven't had any problems or concerns or issues, which is something that we always want to keep on top of mind. The other challenge with the gym is we do have large events, such as Veterans Day, which I know some of you have been a part of, Senior Richmond Fair, parties and lunches for seniors. And when we do those things, which we try to limit as much as possible, but when we do those, it does displace the Phy Ed classes in the Riverside gym. So we work with Mr. Walter, his Phy Ed team, to, a lot of times it's finding a location in the community center where they can do something smaller for Phy Ed. Once again though, you're bringing those students into an unsecure building. So like I said, in the event we do schedule an event in the gym, it does leave the Phy Ed classes looking for an additional location. A little bit about gym use, and I'm gonna talk in two parts. I'm gonna talk about district-wide gym use and community center gym use. As I've said several times already now, there is no gym in the district that is available for use during the day by the community. So that limits some of those programs that we could do during the day, especially for the senior population, but really just the adult population in general. Preschool aged students as well, we could expand some programming there, which I'll get to as well. Just to give you an idea of how much the gyms are used though, from October through March, every gym in the district, and so that's all the elementary schools, middle school, high school, community center, every gym in the district is used nightly. And many of the gyms are used on the weekends. Over the last year or two, we've tried to limit some of that use just with staffing efficiencies and things like that, but every gym is used. When we look just at the community center gym, that gym, depending on the time of year, is used 3 to 5 nights a week and typically on Saturdays as well. And you can see the breakdown there. Once again, October through March, busiest time for gym use. But even during the spring, summer months, our gym is used 3 nights a week in the spring and then 4 nights a week in the fall, or late summer, early fall. So our gyms throughout the district get used a lot. And if you've ever been involved with an organization that uses the gyms in the district, or if you've been to an event in the gyms, you know that gym space is hard to find within the district. Who uses our gyms? So the gyms are used much more than just your daytime Phy Ed classes, obviously. We have high school, middle school athletics, in-season practices, and out-of-season open gyms. Over the years, when I was a kid in high school, you participated in a sport, it was that season, and you were done. Well, now sports, they're all year, and when you're not in your traditional season, there's open gyms and so forth, so those take up gym space. Senior rec programs, special events, both community and school, so I talked a little bit about some of the community events, but even in the school, you have your cultural fairs, they do a student council does like carnivals, lots of different special events, and then we have what's called our affiliate groups, and most of you are familiar with affiliate groups, but those are nonprofits in the community that run programs kind of as an extension of Senior Rec programming. We don't manage the programs, but essentially they get a reduced facility rate and they feed into our high school programs. So Menominee Falls Youth Basketball, Menominee Falls Angels, which is girls fast pitch softball, Milwaukee Sport Club, Menominee Falls Kickers. So a few years back, and I won't get into the whole details of this, Menominee Falls Kickers and Milwaukee Sport Club merged. When they merged, that actually created a need for more gym space. Now, we're not under any obligation when they grow to grant them gym space, but we obviously try to work with these groups as much as possible to give them the space that they need. What's interesting about that too is within the last probably 2 to 3 years, the soccer, youth soccer, I'm not talking high school soccer, but youth soccer, they have really started using a lot more gym space in the off season for practices and so forth. We also have a Special Olympics. They utilize the gyms for their basketball practices, track practices. They actually just this past Saturday started up a cornhole league, so they utilize the gyms. I have Menominee Falls Youth Wrestling Club on there too. They do not currently use gyms, but I've been in conversations over the last couple of years with the wrestling head coach at the high school who also is involved with youth wrestling. And because that program continues to grow, there is some interest in use of a gym, especially an auxiliary gym where we have mats and so forth. So I felt it was important to just include them in the conversation. And then we have miscellaneous rentals too. Now, the rentals are few and far between because of everything else that's going on. with rentals kind of falls at the bottom of the priority list.
A little note about wrestling, we do have a wrestling room, some might know that, but it's quite small.
Right.
So there's some safety concerns with, you have growth of a youth program, there's a limited number of students in there. It just says, I know a lot of people are aware that we have a wrestling room, but there's some safety concerns because of the lack of space.
And then I can speak for miscellaneous rentals, being affiliated with Junior Phoenix, I know they wanted to do like football tournaments, and trying to schedule that has been, it's beneficial for our programs, because it can be a huge money fundraiser for them, getting access to the space for an entire weekend, really, because it displaces a lot of their activities.
So moving on from the gyms to our group exercise, or I'm gonna call it dance studio, we don't do a ton of dance down there, but my hope is if we move in the direction I'm hoping we will, that we can do some more of that. But once again, that group exercise room is located in the lower level of the community center. When I started, now I've been with the district for, this is my 19th year, different roles, and when I started, the group exercise room was used a couple nights a week for adult fitness programs. Since that time, the programming down there has grown tremendously, and I would actually say that now, within the last maybe 5 years or so, we actually have more daytime fitness programming than we do evening fitness programming. So we're seeing that senior population want to be more engaged, more active, and so on. I think our evening fitness programs, even though we're still there 4 to 5 nights a week, we're not running as many classes at night. So we might have 1 or 2 classes instead of running 3 or 4 classes a night. But once again, where that's created challenges, we're using that room 4 to 5 days a week during the day when school's in session, when music class is taking place. So once again, there's just that kind of overlap of school versus the community. In the evenings, that overlap's not an issue, but I just wanted to show up there that we do utilize that space 4 to 5 minutes a week as well. Just general senior center, community center use. So I would say the community center doubles as a senior center. During the day, it's a senior center. It's interesting because we actually have a room at the community center called the senior center, because back in the day, that was the only room that was used for senior programming, is room 106, if you're familiar with that room. Well, over the years, our program has grown, and really the whole building is used during the day by seniors. So during the day, senior center, at night, community center. As you can see, rooms are used for a variety of programs. Every room is used on Monday afternoons and Friday mornings, and when I say every room, I mean every room, even our little conference room is used for like blood pressure checks and things like that. And then most rooms are used the other days of the week. Once again, the community center is used for C and Rec programs. Our offices are located there. Over the years, we've expanded our team, so that's created some challenges with space. And then what's really nice, and I love to point this out, that's a good partnership, is the Waukesha County ADRC runs a daily meal site out of the community center. So they run several throughout the county. Menominee Falls is one of the host sites, and I don't have the data to support this, but I've heard from their meal site manager that Menominee Falls is one of the busier sites, especially after COVID. Things didn't open, other sites never reopened. And actually, I don't want to say we stayed open completely, I think it was like a few days, but meal sites, they kept going. Even during the pandemic, they maybe shied away from in-person dining, but they do home deliveries too. So that's a really great program, and that's been in our building for as long as I've been around. And if there's any questions, I'll give you a chance for questions at the end here. Just some other uses of the community center, and once again, while these are not C and Rec related, and they're not necessarily school related, they're community related, and I think it's important to, I guess, demonstrate that community use, because with these groups that I'm about to talk about, the Optimist Club, the Community League, and the Food Pantry, those 3 specific ones, they do a lot to support our schools as well. And so like Optimist Club, they hold weekly meetings in our building, they have board meetings, I think, once a month. Community League has meetings in our building, and then Food Pantry, just within the last probably 2 years, they started holding their board meetings in our building as well. The food pantry has grown. They've done some different things with their structure as well, so they were just looking for a larger place to hold their board meetings. So they hold their board meetings in our building once a month, I believe, on Fridays. We also have Weight Watchers. That's what I would call a rental. Now when I say rental, they're an established group that uses our facility. They use it twice a week for meetings. And they, once again, that's a group that's been there for as long as I can remember. And then school district meetings are held there on occasion too, whether it's leadership or cabinet or school board meetings once in a while. So as I've shown through some of the current usage right now, why is there a need for an additional gym and additional program space? And really it comes down to increased, or the availability to have a gym during the day that seniors can use, and I'll talk a little bit about specific program possibilities. Increasing that safety piece between Riverside and the community center could reduce scheduling conflicts, could allow schools, because we run programs at school gyms, could allow us to shift some programming to open up space in the schools. I think gyms are always going to be used to capacity no matter what you do. But the great thing about what we're going to be talking about tonight and proposing is it would put the community center all on one level. So right now that group fitness room that I was referring to, that's in our lower level. I mean, it's ADA accessible, there's an elevator. But with what we're gonna talk about tonight, it would put everything on one level, no stairs, no elevators, easy to secure parts of the building. So really it would ensure that everybody has access to facilities, help with increasing those social connections and so forth. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about some of these things here. So like I said, additional daytime programs, special events without displacing FIAD programs. So Lori, who does a great job with our senior programs, she runs parties, I call them parties, but parties, social events, lunches for seniors, and those are very well attended and very popular. A lot of times when we do them, they're based on like holiday around that time or a theme, and that's something that we could do more of if we had a larger space. I mean, we have the room across from our offices, 102A and B, but I mean, we've reached 200 attendees at some times for these events. So we could do more of that without displacing the 5 classes. As I mentioned before, a new gym would allow us to maybe shift some things from schools into the community center gym. It would also allow us to have designated indoor walking times. So a little bit of historical context on that. We actually, going back to when Thomas Jefferson, which was a school, when that school shut down, the rec department ran some programs in that building. And that was great because it allowed us to do some daytime programming such as indoor walking, we had daytime pickleball, but then when that building closed, we didn't have a place to go with those things. So that would allow us to do some of those things. As I mentioned, a new gym would also allow us the opportunity to grow our current programs. I just listed some up there. Pickleball, that's a huge program across the country. We actually run indoor pickleball 2 nights a week right now, and we have a waiting list for both sessions of classes. And then in the summertime, we run them outside, but there's no space issues with that. We have the parks that we utilize. Another area that we could tap into that we don't do a lot of is what I would call preschool movement or like mommy and me or kind of daytime gym classes. We don't do a lot of that just because we don't have that space. And then that would help with an additional gym. All groups want to use gyms at the same time. They all want to use it from like 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. and they're all serving very similar age groups. So this would just give us some more space at those ideal gym times.
One note about that, additional possible adult enrichment program, that's something that came up in this strategic planning process that we're kind of coming through. That's one thing that is an opportunity for us, just based on some feedback that was just mentioned right here. So it's right on point.
And I'm going to touch a little bit on adult enrichment here too shortly. But just some more points, and once again, I've mentioned several of these already, but just to kind of reiterate, the student safety piece, 1 level programming, accommodate more fitness. What I mean by that is right now our current group fitness room, we're limited to how many people can participate based on that room design, and there's a beam that goes right down the middle of the room, so it doesn't create the greatest environment. So with what we'll talk about later, the room will be a little bit bigger, could provide more opportunities for participants, and if we have a gym during the day that's available for use, if you have a large program, you could always shift that to the gym too. Continuation of fitness programs, if current fitness room is converted to Riverside space, which that'll make more sense as we connect the dots here. And just expanded program growth overall. We do have a few programs during the day that share space. Now in the grand scheme of things, the programs that are sharing space, probably not the end of the world. It might be like a Scrabble program and a Bunko program. But it's nice to have your own space, and some people are a little bit quieter, some people are a little louder. They're just looking to create spaces for those programs. And then, as Mr. Muniz mentioned, adult enrichment programs during the day and at night. We do a lot of adult enrichment programming now, but with additional space that would allow us to grow that, specifically based on how we would design rooms. So right now, most of our rooms, except for 102A and B, which is across from our office, have carpeted floors. We don't have easy access to water, and we have the restrooms. But if we redo some of those things, that would help us be able to create possibly and grow some of our adult enrichment programs. It would also allow us, we do run a couple of programs in the Riverside cafeteria in the evenings, just because we need that flooring and so forth. With additional space at the community center would allow us to shift those classes from Riverside back to the community center, essentially closing off the Riverside part of the building at night. Because right now, we have to keep the space open between the two buildings so that people can get to and from. And then I just added in there, we do have one program supervisor, as I mentioned. We've grown our team over the years. And so we've just kind of placed people where we had space, and one of our supervisors just created an accessible office area for that individual. Right now, in order for her to get to her office, she has to walk through another classroom where programs are taking place to get to her office. So we would just do something to kind of reconfigure to get that off the hallway. And then the last thing I just included here, and I apologize if you printed out, I don't know why the logo didn't transfer over in the printout, but I just included our mission and vision because I think it's just really important to always go back to that. Now when I say our mission and vision, this is specific to community and rec. Obviously we have the district mission and vision as well, but really by doing the things that we're going to talk about later this evening, this just helps us continue to improve the quality of life of residents of Menominee Falls by providing these opportunities for all ages from birth to senior citizens. So I just wanted to include that just as that's kind of what we're looking at when we're talking about these things. So with that being said, unless there's any immediate questions, I'm going to turn over to our partners at VGS and EUA.
I think you're first on the screen, so I'll let you introduce yourself first, Chris.
Once again, I'm Chris Coggins with VGS Construction Services, construction manager located in Pewaukee, Wisconsin. I've been working with the school district prior to this since 2015 on miscellaneous projects and the last referendum projects too. So I'll be here and working with the team, providing some cost estimating and I'll talk through scheduling and how these projects can all from design through construction, work with the district on overall accessibility.
Sure, and as I mentioned earlier, Teresa Watzinski with EUA, so I have been working with the district since the Shady Lane Elevator Edition, 2003 maybe. Our firms did a referendum in 1998, North Middle School, so we've got we're very proud of the work and the history with the district. So I'm an architect by trade, now I'm more in the management, was the project manager at the last referendum. My colleague, Kim, who was unable to be here tonight, is a design architect planner. So she's the one who puts together the square footages to the spaces and talks through adjacencies and things like that. So on the next slide, you are going to see floor plans of the Riverside CE and Rec building. And so we wanna, lots of colors on those floor plans, so we wanna sort of give you a lay of the land before we get to that. So anything that is in the light blue, dark blue, or orange is what's being budgeted or priced, that Chris will share when I'm done. But that is, anything in that light blue is a level 1 renovation. Maybe we need to replace the ceiling because we took a wall out or redo floors. Anything in the dark blue is a little bit more extensive renovation, moving walls, moving doors, things like that, and we'll talk about that. And then anytime you see that bright orange, that is new construction, so we'll see that in the floor plan. That's largely that gym addition that Jason's been hinting at here. So, and then some of the other colors that you'll see, anywhere that's not getting renovated or dollars aren't being allocated to, those are the pink. And I apologize if anyone is colorblind, I can get up at the screen and point these out. Anything in that pink color is Riverside and dedicated school space. Anything in that orange is school space during the day, shared space available to community in the evening. And again, we'll talk through that security a little bit. And then that green is the community spaces, dedicated community spaces that would not blend with the school. So these are the two floor plans. You'll see this slide one more time in the presentation. We're gonna talk here about what this means for CE and Rec, and then you'll see it again and we'll talk about what it means for Riverside. So lower level on the left, first floor, ground level on the right. Jason had mentioned several times, let me see, I'll just get up here and point real quick. This is currently where that group exercise room is on the lower level. We'll talk about what that means for Riverside coming up. But what we're looking at is roughly 17,000 square feet of orange addition. So that is a 2-station gym, which essentially means you could pull a curtain down and have 2 separate activities going on at one time, or have the curtain up and have one large gym. Showing some pickleball courts there. Some of the other components in the addition, the orange, would be restrooms, storage. On the closest to the parking lot, we have allocated a classroom space that would be dedicated for CE and Rec. Adjacent to that is that fitness, or if you wanna call it group exercise. And then adjacent to that is another large rec room space that potentially would be that multi-purpose space. In addition to that, there is the ability to create that walking track, that indoor walking. That would be done partially through the new gym with the corridors wrapping around, and those connection corridors that connect to the existing building. That would be done with flooring and ceiling treatments and colors as we get that far in the process. None of that's been really determined at this point. You'll see, and actually, can I go up to the front again? Was that distracting when I did that? Sorry. So the current main entrance of the rec right here, the doors would be redone. There's some issues right now with being able to open and close those doors. So coming into the CE and Rec, taking this large space that's there now and creating that corridor into the addition. This rec room would largely remain the same, and then doing something similar back here for this, the senior room, and creating that corridor in the space. I'm trying to think what else. This is one option of essentially 4 that we explored. One option was looking at, some sort of addition this direction. It was quickly realized that just took up way too much parking. That was too valuable. We couldn't do that. One was a slightly larger addition, and just trying to be sensitive to the price point and the budget. So that option was eliminated. We loosely looked at adding on this way, and just being able to access that portion of the site and how much lower it was. That was eliminated before that was further developed. So this really was the one you'll see on the budget sheet in the next slide, it says option 3. So this was essentially option 3, that's why you're seeing that, we eliminated the other ones. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanna highlight. I guess I'm assuming I should pause there for questions, just in case.
So my initial question would be, take the gym out of it, cause I think the gym stands alone. I'm surprised we didn't add more multi-use space, so how much are you actually getting, in conjunction with the needs that you have, so. I'm curious when you say, not that I wanna see the price tag that goes with it, but I'm curious from a use standpoint that if we're gonna invest the dollars, everybody wants to be able to look at the full option, so. Does that meet your needs in terms of programming and the story that you,
I mean,
does it just get us by?
I would say it gets us more than just by.
Okay.
Obviously, the more space, the better. But this would allow us to continue to operate what we currently are with some expansion. One thing that we would also, so we would gain a multi-purpose facility kind of on the far left here on the bottom. But we would also gain, in this diagram here, we would gain room 109, which is where Quest currently is, back during the day, because during the day, thank you Teresa, during the day, Quest would be in that addition, in that classroom space.
And another part of this is we are maximizing with this plan, the space for Riverside. And we're doing it in a way, because we have limitations, we cannot use Fund 10 effectively to, I mean, really the bigger need is the Riverside, piece, but we're limited by revenue limits and different issues inside of the legal aspects of the utilization of Fund 10. So we are maximizing space for Riverside by essentially doing it this way for CE and REC, which is Fund 80. There is no limit in 80, and it's not creating any debt. So this creates no debt.
And so Shelley, just to go back to your question too, this option I liked out of one of the other ones because this did give us that extra. So I look at this as us gaining a gym and 2, what I'm gonna call multi-purpose spaces. And another one, we would only gain 1 multi-purpose space. So yes, this will help us grow. What more space down the line be nice, definitely. I mean, we could always build the space, but this is within the current budget and the current finances and things like this. This is where we landed right now.
And you get your needs met?
Yes, as best as they can.
Given that we have limitations.
Given Yeah, as best as they can be met.
Jason, you wanna talk to storage? We had a lot of conversations about storage.
Yeah, I mean, storage across the district, and Chris can speak to this too, but storage across the district is always a challenge. And so, in this drawing here, we added some storage. Now, if you were to ask me if we needed more program space or storage space, we might need some more storage space too. Because with a new gym, you have new sets of volleyball nets, new sets of pickleball equipment. So we do have some storage added there, but we have storage currently in the lower level of the community center as well. If we lose that, which we haven't determined yet completely if we would lose that or not, if we lose that, storage will be a challenge, but we also will force us to go through our storage and make sure we're keeping what we need to keep.
Some of the key takeaways is we're maximizing space for Riverside. We're not creating any debt, so there's no borrowing with this, actually. And $3.3 million of interest savings over 12 years, 10 years, 10, 12 years on top of that. So there's several moving parts with this, which is why it's coming as a package. But The only other way to really, leverage the Riverside piece would to be to build another school.
Or build another cafeteria. We
Right.
talked about that. I mean, the cafeteria is a
Right.
major issue, but
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Was there any plans that included some type of compens or solution
yeah,
for
make
it?
it a fun.
So going to Fund 10, I mean, it's 3 to 5 million and more, that's a whole other, you're talking borrowing, you're talking a lot of different things. We just retired our Fund 38 debt, means you'd be talking about 38 debt, there's a lot of potentialities. So what this project, it does increase space for senior rec. It does put everything on one level. It eliminates the crossover of adults and students during the day. So it increases the level of security from what we have right now. And it does provide more space for Riverside than what they currently have. So it's one of the reasons why we're presenting it as a package. I know we have slides that are coming with the Riverside piece, so we'll get to that a little bit more.
Do you see any issues with you needing additional office space then, with program expanding? Unless,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, office space is tight now, as it is. If you've been to our office, we have 3 front office administrative assistants that are really pretty close to being on top of each other. They're in there tight. So office space is something that we could always use more of. We do not have that included in this model.
I guess I would be interested in seeing what the expanded, version of this looked like. Just to compare, to have more of an information.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'd rather see all the options. If this is gonna get us by the next couple of years, at all the cost, we wanna build onto that, and the future's gonna be greater than it is now, right? So I'd rather see what we have with the option. I think it was option 2, you said built out further.
The option 2 was largely the orange addition was bigger, and it was more program space. It was expanded, multi-purpose, more storage, and just the slightly different configuration of that track piece. It didn't address the office.
Offices.
Okay.
That being said, we could certainly
I
look
see.
at that as an option.
Yeah.
Just because we haven't yet doesn't mean that that's
Sure.
not possible.
And just as we mentioned, Caitlin mentioned it a little bit, that the way that this is currently configured does decrease the mill rate. We are projecting, even with all of this, the fees project, we'll get to the numbers, another decrease in mill rate for the district at the next annual meeting. So, why don't we jump back to the presentation?
All right, well, now with the cost, so being that, as Teresa said earlier, we're going through a handful of options and we landed at option 3, which was the orange section that you saw right there. This is an overall, we call it project cost summary, so this gives you a dashboard, there's a bunch of backup substantiation to back up these numbers right here. But this is just kind of overall project cost summary, which is inclusive of all the different projects that we were talking about. So there's really 4 projects included. There's option 3, which was the orange, which was the new addition. And that's a 17,436,000 square foot addition. The number right to the right of it is a square foot number, but that is computed with all the backup. We had a 15-page backup document identifying all the different scope that was included in the number, all right? The next item is a parking lot, because the existing parking lot would have to be relocated. Okay, so we have that cost captured. The next line item is the renovation of the, so it's the light blue and dark blue colors that were in the building, so it's the existing community rec building that we were actually renovating the existing conditions there. Then the last item is what Teresa pointed out, it was the entry into the community rec building. Right now, there's a vestibule, there's 2 sets of doors. The exterior sets of doors aren't really that accessible, so what we were planning on doing was updating the doors there and between the exterior doors and the interior doors of putting sliders in there. So when someone walks up, so imagine walking into a store, it automatically opens up versus pushing a button, then one of the doors open up. So this would give the seniors more accessibility into the building by just walking up to it, and then the sensor would open the doors. So that cost is broken out. And then the other couple line items are when we look at any project, it's total project cost. So it would be bond costs, the construction management costs, our insurance costs. And then right now, all these costs that are included in this estimate are today's costs. So we use a couple things right now. So we use our historical cost information from past projects, and then also we use recent relevant past projects that we bid. So we bid a lot of projects month over month. So I'm actually using bid numbers for costing information right now. So that's in today's numbers, and then I put an inflation factor of 2.80, and that is based upon some feedback from the team where we were talking about this project would potentially start a year from now, like next spring. So the current costs are today's numbers, and I'm putting up an inflation factor of 2.80 in there. And then lastly, Teresa and EUA, they do a great job, but these are concept drawings, all right? We did not bid the project out, these are just estimate numbers here. So she provided those high-level schematic drawings or concept drawings that she referenced. I am working with my team behind the doors with her team and working through the specifics, okay? So what's your intent here? So we work really close together for many years. Now I'm filling all the gaps right now, that's part of the 15-page backup to identify all the potential costs for this job right here. So even with that, at this stage, we carry contingency anywhere like ranging from 5 to 10%. Right now, with the detail that we know, with the feedback from the team in general, we're carrying a 7% contingency, a 7% contingency right now, which we feel is more than substantial for this project. And then lastly, soft costs. Like I said, this is total project cost, so this is the construction costs, fees, and soft costs. Soft costs in general are any costs that do not run through the construction manager, VJS. Those costs would be run directly through the district, which would be EUA's costs, like the engineering consulting fees, but then also like say they're gonna purchase furniture. They're gonna, being that there's an addition that's being done here, they're gonna need to get geotechnical services out there to do soil borings. So all those items that aren't run through VJS, we call them soft costs. So I am putting a factor on this overall estimate right now, and that's how I come down to the 8.3 number here. So this is total project cost at this stage of the game. One item that I just wanted to kind of hit upon, the schedule that we were looking at, it was the eight-month project schedule. So if we start next spring, we were looking at like a May or June start next year. And then we would finish up in, end of December, January of the following year. So that's what we're looking at for an 8-month project. Working back from that, and Teresa did, look at it. If that's the case, she would design to this fall. And then this fall, being November, December, we would bid out the project. And then from January to May, we're procuring materials. We're locking in contracts, we're going through the approvals. So when we do start in May or June, we have all the materials ready to go, and then that's how we come to the eight-month project. So the project, there's a bunch of upfront procurement work that you don't see with the start of construction if that's being done behind, the scenes. So just want to hit upon the project schedule there.
Chris, if I can interject, the Riverside portion of this, which we'll get to in a second, that schedule, not this summer, but that would have to be done the following summer to be ready by September 1st of that next school year to create additional classroom space.
That's correct. And that's isolated on the two different, we have two different project schedules going on.
Just a couple things that I've gone through multiple projects in my job right now, construction. In normal times, I would say the 2.8 inflation is good. The 7% contingency is good. I don't think we're in normal times right now. I've seen people overblow budgets. I'd feel more comfortable with a 10% project contingency and a 3.5% inflation, to be honest.
Okay.
Just from what I've seen in current multi-million-dollar construction projects.
Funny you say that, the contingency in our, on how we track contingency through ENR, it is last year to this current March was 3.48%. But the numbers that are in all these current construction costs are projects that just recently bid, in different, different school districts that are starting this fall or next summer also. So that's why I ticked it down to 2.8. I don't wanna artificially inflate numbers accordingly, but I completely understand where you're going to.
Jump to the Riverside.
Do you wanna, he has to come off in 4 minutes of any question, I don't wanna take up his time.
So our timing is looking like Eric will be back around 6:50 to 7.
Okay.
So we'll get to the debt defeasance piece around that time.
Okay.
And I think we'll be just fine for us.
Alright, Riverside. So our issue, as we've alluded to already, is space, and it's funny because, when I started at Riverside, we were about, this is way back when, but about 300 kids, and I remember going up to 325 and everybody saying, whoa, we can't breathe around here. And now we're at 431. Today, we have a new student, so we'll be at 432 by Wednesday. But anyway, we are just a little bit cramped for space, so Caitlin has up there the enrollment projections. Typically, I would say prior to the last 5 years or so, we used to hover around 17 classrooms or 17 sections, I'll call them. We have 19 classrooms at Riverside. There's a couple that are, give or take, they're a smidge smaller. We went up to 18, we've been at 18 for like the last 5 years or so, so we've had to use those rooms. So we've had that additional room for quite a while now. That additional room is used for, we use that multi-purpose word that Jason used. The additional room is used for, we do have, we have a 6th grade math section, we obviously have 5th graders that are taking 6th grade math while they're at Valley View and Riverside. So that classroom is used an hour and a half in the morning right now to teach 6th grade math. Next year we won't have it, we'll go to the cafeteria, they'll get math in the cafeteria. It's used for small group spaces, testing. I would say, there's various times, whether it's state testing for this next month, whether it's unit tests, if a child's IEP has they need to take tests in a separate setting, and we can't procure one of our interventionist rooms, we use that room for testing. Book fairs, larger parent meetings, if you've been in our office, our conference room is quite tight, so if there's a larger parent meeting or larger IEP, we use that additional room for that. So it's used for a wide variety of things. So as you can see from the enrollment projections, next year we'll go up to 19 sections total, or 19 classrooms. So we will use that extra room, trying to figure out how we're going to use those other spaces. Those other things that I listed, where we're going to go with them. I'm just gonna see if I can capture everything.
And in terms of the staffing plan, which the board will be projected to approve here at the regular meeting, we are adding an additional teacher at Riverside Elementary as well. So the projected elementary add is at Riverside to address the space issues from a classroom perspective. So that's already built in to our projected budget.
So if you go to the following slide, the next slide is kind of illustrating there'll be another section of 7 coming through. So we'll have this bubble group of two grade levels of 7 sections for the next couple of years. So if you're doing the math, obviously we're gonna use that 19th classroom next year. The following year, that would be 25, 26, we don't have space for that additional classroom, and that's why we started talking. And Jason, Community Ed and Rec, has been a wonderful neighbor, but you can only take so much of your neighbor's land before they get upset. And so we're just out of space at Riverside, quite frankly, 2 years from now, definitely out of classroom space and all those other activities that happen in day-to-day school functions. We won't have space next year, and we're gonna have to, we'll figure it out next year somehow, but we're really struggling for space right now and into the future. So on top of that, if you go to the next slide, I kind of alluded to cafeteria. So our cafeteria, if you've been in our cafeteria, rectangular shape, we have, fire code says we should have about 145 students in there. We have, if you do the math, our highest grade level is about 150, but I would argue that there's, due to absences and other things or special lunches with the counselor things, there's never really a day that 150 kids aren't really in there. We have 3 lunch hours right now. Next year, what we'll do, because we'll be over code next year, without a doubt. We'll go to 4 lunch hours. It does have some instructional impacts. Obviously, when you have, the less lunch hours you have, the greater efficiencies with staffing those lunch hours, whether it be our regular education EA supervising those lunch hours, or there are special ed EAs because students do their IPs, there's some lunch coverage and things that I would say that are in there. So we do have to have people in there with them, and obviously that's gonna spread people thinner, the greater lunch hours that you have. So there'll be some efficiencies lost and help not in classrooms during that time because people will be on lunch, but there's really not another way to get around it for next year, but adding another lunch hour. There's some other ideas up here, whether you could take one classroom and they would eat up in a classroom, but who's gonna supervise them? We talked about utilizing, during COVID, we had the cafeteria split up, we used half the gym for lunch. We could certainly do that too, but then we added manpower, custodial staff, and kitchen staff and more supervisory staff, because now we have 2 lunch rooms operating at the same time. So we could do that. The easiest, still some challenges, but the easiest way is probably just to add another lunch hour, but cafeteria space is becoming a huge issue. So we did look at some models for adding cafeteria space. I think that's one of the reasons this conversation started. But, current funding, we're doing the best we can with, not dipping in the funds now.
Did you guys consider doing flipping?
We talked about that, we just don't have the space, and BF does the same thing, we don't have the space to do it with our little cafeteria. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same sort of, the high school has 3 lunches for the same reason, they can't put them only 2. Any principal who runs a building, they would have the least amount of lunches as
Right.
possible, because it creates less conflicts in the schedule, and less movement here and there, just a helpful thing. But it is a way to short-term fix it. If this is approved, it could help us, especially with the classroom space issue, in the following school year. Which, like I said, the plan as it's currently laid out increases space for C and rec. And then by them decreasing the old space, it increases space for Riverside. So we have some of that kind of built in the further part of the presentation, which I know we're getting to.
And I wanna have one more note on the additional lunch periods, it's strain on the food service staff as well. So that's just that many more times that have to be cleaned up and prepped, and your food quality is going down as we add more lunch periods. So there's a whole other component to that, and it's hard to fill those positions in our school nutrition program as well, so.
And then sometimes you have children eating lunch at 10 a.m.
Right, yeah, now you're like literally stretched for time,
Yeah.
where you're too early and late.
And by the end of the school day, they are ready for another lunch.
Yeah, so good point, I mean, this year, 11:30, 12, and 12:30 is this year. Next year will be 11, they'll run every quarter hour, 11:15, 11:45, 12:15, 12:45.
Which is still actually
We're
later than those.
Yeah, we're over, we're not gonna end it.
Hungry at 11.
When I say that's still later than middle school.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I first my kids that eat at 10 and 1, so that makes me feel really good. So looking again at the floor plan, as we just talked about, we're increasing the space. The option addresses the enrollment bubble, the 6 sections to 7 sections. We're not adding square footage to the cafeteria in this option. So looking at the left hand side of the screen, what that does to the lower level of the building. So again, that large blue space on the corner there used to be that group exercise room. That we are looking at relocating the library to that part of the building. Music room is essentially staying where it is, but we're eliminating the long, skinny, narrow room and appropriately sizing it by being able to give some of that space to the LMC. And so essentially that lower level becomes all Riverside space for the day. So you're not having adults going down there to do yoga, walking by kids going to music class. On the first floor, the area in dark blue that is circled in red there is the existing library, and so that would be reallocated to create 2 classrooms, essentially. So that's a long linear space right now, and the square footage is there to match the classroom size. And so that would be the renovated areas that Chris will share with the budget in just a second. But again, to the right of those 2 classrooms on the far side of the building there is that long cafeteria space. That's not physically getting bigger as part of this option.
Cost wise, total square footage of the renovated lower level and the first floor is 6,200 square feet. So that would be to capture both the interior, the light and heavy renovation of the spaces. One note I wanted to bring up to you is getting to the contingency and the soft cost, being that this is a smaller project, and it's really finishes, but we bumped up the contingency to 10% to get to $39,000, but then also soft costs. That percentage looks large, but the big portion for the soft costs is FF&E furniture and fixtures, which is putting furniture in those 2 classrooms, added classrooms. So ideally, a new classroom, when I budget, I run anywhere from 20 to 25,000 $20,000 to $25,000 per classroom. So that'd be $50,000 just in furniture, which is why I bumped that up to make sure we got that covered. And then in addition to the consultant, and then any other miscellaneous owner costs that would run through the owner. So that, I just wanna draw attention to that. That's why it looks odd, 22%, but it's just a percentage, but I'm trying to capture the $95,000 overall cost there.
Just to devil's advocate real quick, have we considered renovating the cafeteria, making that like music and LCM, and then making that area a bigger space for your cafeteria?
You're renovating the cafeteria, I'm sorry.
So like, moving like the music and this LCM.
It's like making this the cafeteria.
Yep, make that the cafeteria, and then your cafeteria over there, you would kind of renovate to make those like the music rooms with that.
I think we'd have to talk through the kitchen, to move the kitchen downstairs would be, I don't know how it costs.
Costly.
And that if the square footage upstairs.
We talked about it, meaning when Chris and I were down there, we were doing our walkthrough with a lot of the people here. Part of it had to do with the kitchen. Now, the kitchen could use expansion, the kitchen could use a lot of things.
Sure.
And I'll just go 30,000 foot, I wouldn't have a dime more than what's on here to see in rec. But if there's any money available in 10 to put into expansion of the cafeteria, we have limitations in 10 based on the revenue limit. So I wanna be clear about that. The limitations don't exist on the other side, but you're balancing the levies with the mill. So I mean, there's a balancing act here and the timing is right with defeasance. So, you could do the C and rec expansion, but it'd probably be more, it's a valid point. We walked through the cafeteria, we did measurements, we stepped it off, we had the conversations. It was part of what we talked about, but it's more difficult because it's a lower and there's a classroom above. It would be easier if there was already a lower punched out. I mean, there's a lot more expenses from a construction standpoint. Having done these, I know you guys have, I have, that if you're gonna punch out something and you don't have an upper, you're creating, it's an architectural issue, a construction issue.
Yeah, one of the most expensive parts of the building is the exterior envelope, so when you go out, you're moving the total envelope out, and then also on how the MEP systems are set up, they're on the exterior wall too, so everything gets magnified by cost when you start moving. While you only look at it, you're like, well, hey, we're only moving a wall 6-8 feet. Due to addition, it's a really expensive when you start doing the square footages by start lining out all the specific costs. So there's items like that just bump up the cost for the small additions.
So in an ideal world without revenue limits, you bet, expand the Riverside cafeteria. But we have limits on that side of the formula with 10 that don't exist on the other side. But that's part of the timing issue that was being alluded to in the initial part of the presentation.
We did look at or at least talked through an option of a cafeteria addition, essentially where that asphalt playground is in the back of the building. It comes back to moving that kitchen and the
Right.
expense of that kitchen.
Oh, yeah, that's right, we walk and sat out there.
Yeah,
That was the
that'd be a great place for a cafeteria.
Yeah, we did.
Little
And this
connect,
little
glass
bike,
connection.
it's like the bike rodeo area.
Safety, yeah, safety counts.
Safety counts, yeah, sorry, safety.
We do that too.
That's another.
They do too.
Sorry. Safety count. Alright, separate and secure facilities.
Okay, so we'll move on to, we've talked about this a number of times, but to reiterate, Riverside Music and CE and Rec group exercise classes happen within the same hallway and oftentimes concurrently during the week. So we learned that oftentimes during the day, those classes for CE and Rec programming are during the day. So again, creating overlap between community and our students and staff in really an unsecured portion of the building because we had to expand. So this project then creates two separate secure buildings that function separately, where that whole downstairs piece becomes Riverside and no longer that overlap where it's Riverside and CE and Rec. And then we've spent a while looking at doors and standing in that little vestibule and talking about the hallways and what type of doors are needed for egress, that's why we have experts that know that stuff, and we're looking at, okay, who's where in the building. So we've talked through that piece to make sure that what's presented creates these separate facilities. And at the same time, Quest also has a separate entrance where it's kind of like their own separate little section of the building that becomes a separate entrance and exit with bathrooms that really kind of becomes three separate spaces where we're not having those overlaps of community and students.
Can you go back and just show where Quest is again?
It's labeled classroom, but oops.
It becomes the first floor.
So this area is labeled classroom and it has a toilet facility within it.
That would be
It
for
was
Quest.
most likely, that would be Quest, and they could have a separate entrance exit right there. They wouldn't even have to go in that part of the building at all. There'd be doors here to egress for, the size of the gym, people would have to get out, but it would be directly to their classroom, their own.
And what's in the front there, right in front of the gym?
This,
No, in the orange,
so
that right there, yeah.
right now, we're showing storage room spaces, 2 individual single-user restrooms, family restrooms, whatever you wanna call them, and then larger, male-female restrooms to accommodate the gym capacity.
That was my next question, where's the bathroom?
Yeah. And if you're on the CE and Rec side, you would still have access to these restrooms, it's just you would need those additional for the additional occupancy.
And we do have that space labeled as class because it will function in the evenings as CE and Rec programming space.
The Quest room.
Yes, so it's
And that's
basically a
currently,
general multipurpose classroom.
and that's currently what we do now too.
Right,
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely.
so yeah, functioning the same as we currently use our class.
and that's roughly the same size, right? They didn't,
I think that's,
I was gonna say same size or bigger, but yes, it matches the same size.
that's a nice one. Right, but the room they're in now is not size.
so we'll move into cost and the funding mechanisms, and before we get to this piece, I'll introduce Matt Clark. Matt Clark is our finance manager. He has his master's in school business management and shortly will become our interim director of finance and operations when I head out on maternity leave. So,
Oh,
he,
look at all those hands.
Matt's great. Matt is highly skilled and has the same degrees I have. So, he will be talking through the cost piece, next.
And Matt has been sitting in on all of our meetings, in the transition, so it's gonna be great.
It'll be great.
He's gonna do awesome, and Matt is already doing awesome, so why don't you go ahead, Matt?
Thank you, Caitlin. So again, I'm gonna be going over the funding sources for this project. Before I get started, I wanna lay some groundwork and some context in regards to school district funding. So school district funding and accounting operates under what's called fund accounting. And what fund accounting basically means is that all of our activities and programming belong to a particular fund and a particular pot of money, depending on what the program or activity is. So our total tax levy that you can see here, this is our total tax levy over the last handful of years, made up of these different colors, which represent the different funds. So I'm gonna go through each color and then kind of explain how the Fund 80 portion is being funded in this project. So the blue portion of each bar represents our Fund 10 levy. This is our general operating fund. It is where the majority of our school programming and operations lie. Within Fund 10, we have most of our salaries and benefits for staff. We have all of our general education, transportation, utilities, insurance, and much more. So this is the majority of our levy, as you can see, the big blue chunk, and it helps cover all of our general operating expenses. The red portion of each bar is what's called Fund 39. This is our debt service fund. Now, our debt service fund holds all of our referendum approved debt. We have prior approved referenda over the last handful of years that we still have debt on the books for. And so we have to levy each year to cover those annual debt payments. Lastly, the green portion that you see on this graph is the Community Education Fund. This is the Jason Husline Fund. So as you can see, the green portion expands in 24-25 and 25-26, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But what Fund 80 is it covers all of our community education and recreation activities and programming. So this is also covering a portion of our school resource officers. So 50% of all of our school resource officers are also funded in that green part of each bar. The majority of Fund 80 revenue comes from programming fees. It does not come from the tax levy, so that's an important piece to note. But as you can see when looking at this graph in the total tax levy, over the last handful of years, the total levy has maintained under $40 million with minimal fluctuations over the years. So, and due to our debt defeasance that Eric Cass will be talking about in a couple slides, what we're able to do to fund this project is essentially swap the red portion of the fund, the debt service fund, with the green portion of the graph to cover the community education recreation project. So in 24-25, we will be levying $5 million additionally in Fund 80 using the Fund 39 defeasance. And then in 25-26, we would be levying additionally 3.3 to cover the rest of the project, again using the debt defeasance vehicle. One thing to note that the total tax levy that you're seeing in 24-25 and 25-26 is still the same total amount that was presented to the Board of Education in March by Keaton. So that's an important piece to also note. This slide is a really good depiction of how we're going to be funding the Fund 80 portion. And again, that is just the community education portion of this project.
So this is showing no borrowing money for this project.
No borrowing.
And reducing interest for the taxpayers over 12 years, 3.3 million. So no debt, 3.3 million less in interest, and the mill rate is going down.
So that covers the Fund 80 portion. Again, that's the community education and recreation portion of the project. Fund 10 is exclusively the Riverside piece. So again, this is just under $530,000. And the funding source for this part of the project will be coming from the district fund balance in the 24-25 fiscal year. Now, one of the goals of a fund balance is to avoid the need to short-term borrow for cash flow purposes. And a good measure of a school district's financial health is the percentage of fund balance in relation to Fund 10 expenditures. So generally speaking, a fund balance of 25% of expenditures is considered a healthy fund balance. And as you can see in the image I have here on the slide, the school district of Menominee Falls has been very financially responsible over the last many years and has been able to grow the fund balance to 34% roughly in the current fiscal year. Now, what I wanted to do with this image is show you the before and after as far as the fund balance percentage accounting for the Riverside Fund 10 portion of the project. So taking into account the $530,000, you can see that in the 24-25 fiscal year, we would still have 33% fund balance in regards to Fund 10, which again is a very healthy place to be. It does not hinder any sort of cash flow needs on our end.
Cash flow meaning that most districts who don't short-term borrow, which we do not, are using their fund balance to make payroll.
Right.
So we get money from the state of Wisconsin, like 4 to 5 times a year, something like that. And it's at odd times throughout the year. we think they would send it all July 1, but they don't. It comes in these intermittent buckets of time. So the fund balance is used to make payroll until the money we know is coming in actually hits our bank accounts. That's one of the big functions.
Don't we also use this for contingency planning? So, let's say we have to replace a boiler.
Or chiller.
Or chiller, yeah.
Chiller.
Which is reflected in these numbers, but.
Which is already.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, so-
yeah,
And I wanna just be able to say like, are we comfortable with the 33% in the event that we do have large unexpected
Mhm.
also coming in conjunction with payroll?
Correct. So part of the questions about expanding the cafeteria and this and that, this is the why of like why we can't do too much more. Because we start hitting, the 25% while it's considered healthy doesn't necessarily reflect the percent at which we would have to short-term borrow. It's higher than that. Like we'd have to short-term borrow, I don't want to give a percent, but it's probably in the 30s still, like a low 30% number. So keeping it at 25 is healthy in terms of credit rating agencies, which is important for when you do borrow, you have lower interest rates. But this is part of the reason why we're looking at doing like the proposed product as presented, is because it's what we can do within our means.
Still keep a healthy fund balance.
Yep, so keep a healthy fund balance and avoid short-term borrowing, leaving some room for contingency planning if there is a big expense that comes across that's needed.
we could take more fund balance, but we wanna be cautious with that, which is why I made the comments earlier about the balance, Fund 10, the difference between 10 and 80. The money we'd be leveraging, the part in the green, right, part in the green on the slides before, that's not creating any debt, right? The part in the red or orange or whatever they're tough with colors, but I mean, that's existing debt that's hanging out there from the last past referendum. Right, and the bonds aren't callable on that for another 5 years or something. So that's not an issue, it's not like we could pay that off or anything. You know, it's just too much money out there, but we can do this.
And again, doing it this way means there's no additional borrowing,
Right.
so we don't have future interest payments or anything that impacts.
Right.
Yep.
Which is why this is all coming in one giant presentation, because the conjunction of the projects paired with the timing of the defeasance is ideal. If we did them differently, we would see mill rates and levies roller coastering and levy spikes, et cetera. So the swapping really of the red for the green is us not borrowing new funds and us maintaining that levy as consistently as possible.
I'm assuming there's lots of steps to this process for approval, but are we asking the public to weigh in?
We'll be coming to the board on the 22nd with a proposal. So one of the reasons we're leveraging this meeting is to being sure that we can get those questions out there, get them answered, come back to the next board meeting with whatever other information might be desired. This is all being recorded, the majority, actually all the board is here, or majority of the board is here, and to just start delving into questions that anybody might have about any of it.
There's a website that will go live at tonight, after the finance committee meeting here tonight, and we also will have a press release in the morning. So it'll be out for our community to know and to receive feedback regarding.
And I'm presenting to our PTO tomorrow night.
Alright, so we will move into similarly, we'll talk about how this affects taxes. So the mill rate functions similarly to the levy, but really this is the piece that a homeowner could calculate their school-based portion of their property tax bill from. So our mill rate has been decreasing over time and actually is at a 30-year low right now. And you can see how current year 23-24, we're at a 691. And with the projects plural, the projected mill rate for next year is 680 and decreasing again projected to 640. Again, those are projected numbers. There's things that swing mill rates and levies, including state aid, The 25-26 year is a new state biennial budget, so that is, again, we're in the unknown territory of what happens with what the state does in terms of the state aid bucket as a whole. But you can see the 680 mill rate projected again for 24-25, and then again decreasing projected for 25-26. And these, you'll see the bars are sort of similar to what we looked at with the levy in terms of the gray is our general operating levy, so for our Fund 10 expenses mainly. And then we have the purple as our approved debt service, so that's our Fund 39 debt. And then you'll see a tiny, if you can even see on there, the top portion is that teal color for community service. So ultimately we're swapping the portion of the mill rate that was for debt service with the community service in 24-25. And then in 25-26, it's really both the Fund 80 and the Fund 39 pieces of that levy that you're seeing. And then we kind of go back to normal in 26-27, where we have less of that Fund 80 levy, because that project will be funded through the 24-25 and 25-26 fiscal years. So the math of what is a mill rate? A mill rate is for, come on, this is like really not, this is fun. The mill rate is.
Everybody should have this memorized by now.
This is my favorite slide.
I get it every time I see it.
You can't get your calculator out, it's fine.
This is very important.
It is important, but
I was not expecting that. I had to get to this one.
You go.
So the mill rate is the rate that a property owner pays for every $1,000 of property value. So to make it nice and simple is the fair market value of a home times the mill rate, but move the decimal over 3 places, so divide by the mill rate divided by 1,000, or move the decimal over, is the individual school portion of the property tax bill. So again, a property tax bill has multiple taxing entities, so in the village, there's the county, there's WCTC, and the school district, and we are, one portion of that. So to calculate the school portion, this is the big calculation. You can then see our 2023, so our current tax mill rate of $691, and we use 310 because that is the median household value in Waukesha County. That's as close as we could get to what's reflective of our actual community. So 310 is the median value, so we use that in our calculations just to show an example. Again, this is going to vary for every homeowner, and it could be smaller, it could be larger. But in 2023, the 310 times that mill rate of $691 gives a school-based portion of the property tax bill of $2,142.10. If the home value doesn't change, we know values are increasing, but if it doesn't change, for the sake of an example, that same home at a 680, you can see the $2,108. So it leaves some room for home values to increase. We do know that the market is slowing a smidget, and we had a lot of fair market value increases in our village last year. So double digits, so we could anticipate that's gonna slow somewhat, and we wouldn't see as high of increases moving into the future. But this does allow somebody to just play with the calculator to say, okay, what happens if my home value does go up by 10% again? And what would this mill rate look like on my home? So that's why we show this. It's important to have somebody take it to their personal level and what would this actually do to their own pocketbook. Any further questions? The mill rate piece. So I'm gonna get us started with Eric's slides. He is presenting virtually in another school district, and then we'll hop back on. We expect him to appear on by side, so I'm sure he will be on shortly. And we will talk through a Fund 39 defeasance. I'll introduce Eric. Well, he's not even been on yet, but Eric is the Director of Public Finance for PMA Securities. So we work with PMA on our debt, on debt defeasance, on prepayments, etc. And we had conversations, Eric's the one who joined us last year with our finance committee meeting. We talked about, is now the right time for a debt defeasance? What is a debt defeasance, etc. So going into more of the granular pieces of a debt defeasance, it sounds like a scary word, but it's really just a prepayment. Oh, great timing, Eric. I'm glad you're here because we're just ready to get into the debt defeasance slides.
I listened to it, you're doing a great job.
Well, I'll turn it over to you so Eric is the Director of Public Finance at PMA. And Eric, we've got your slides up on the screen across the room that I don't think you can see, so.
Yeah, it's a little blurry, so are you on the one where it talks about the Fund 39 debt?
Yeah, we're just starting that one, so you can go ahead and take it over.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so the word defeasance is simply a fancy way of saying prepaying your debt before you're really allowed to. And when we're talking about a defeasance in this capacity, we always have to remember that we're talking about referendum approved debt. So these are levied funds that the board has strategically set aside the last 2 Novembers as they look at managing their levy and their mill rate. And really the only purpose that these funds can be used for is to pay down principal and interest at any point in time. As Caitlin alluded to earlier, when we had this conversation about a year ago, there was a big unknown in terms of the state budget. And really what that means is we couldn't very well predict in collaboration with Matt and Caitlin what the state aid impacts. So we didn't want to recommend a defeasance a year ago, for example, and set the district up for a potential tax increase because we didn't know how that was going to impact your equalization aid. We know much better at this point in time and have worked quite diligently, the 3 of us, to kind of model it out and make sure that we're very comfortable with what we're going to be putting in front of you here this evening as part of the discussion. So this levy is outside revenue limits, meaning it does not compete with classroom resources. So separate allocation, similar to Fund 80, but you only get access to it locally when you actually have a vote to approve the issuance of debt for a capital referendum. You may levy additional funds up to the amount of debt service, principal and interest outstanding. That's a very big number. I just use that as a benchmark. So you do have full flexibility on levying for and paying off all of your debt at one fell swoop. Nobody ever really does that, but it's an important concept to understand. You do have the flexibility on an annual basis as Board of Education to think strategically about how you manage your levy and your mill rate. Getting to the next slide, I think it's important to understand a little bit of what a defeasance is and who the people that are involved in the transaction very quickly. So as I stated, it is a mechanism to prepay existing debt prior to the call date. So a call date is something that we build into any issuance. It's normally between 7 and 9 years. And what that gives the school board, once we hit the call date, is the ability to pay off debt early or to take advantage of lower interest rates in the marketplace. So if you have 5% interest rate, you hit a call date, we're at 2% in the market, you can refinance that and lower your exposure by that difference between the 5 and the 2%. So that and prepaying the debt at that point in time are really the common uses for a call feature. The defeasance is a little bit different because funds, the debt is not callable, so we have to put those funds into a legal binding escrow account. And so in order to do that, there's 4 partners that are outlined there that need to come to the table and kind of work through the transaction. Number 1 would be PMA, so we're going to show you the recommendation on the use of the funds here in the next slide, but we run all those scenarios and help coordinate the whole process for the school district. Bond counsel, of course, needs to be involved because this is a multiple step process. There has to be a formal resolution by the school board to authorize the deposit of those funds. And when you deposit those funds in the escrow, the liability for the principal is no longer a liability of the school district. It actually is a liability of the escrow and lowers your overall debt burden, which is another positive. The escrow agent that I alluded to is a third member of the transaction. Associated Bank and larger banks are the normal escrow agents that we would be working with. And then the final one is something called a verification agent. So that's a CPA that's required by law to come in and verify that our calculations are correct, that the amount of money that we say you can pay off at the call date is actually going to be available. So bringing it all together and coming back to the left side, the approximate cost is about $15,000 to $16,000 for all of those parties coming together. Just another reason tangentially why, we don't like to do defeasance necessarily every single year, but we like to build up some equity and not have a $15,000 transaction multiple years in a row, which is kind of another situation we find ourselves in. Getting into the next slide, Caitlin, you can click that link. What we're looking at here is your existing debt as well as kind of the ultimate recommendation for how to utilize the funds that have been built up over the last 2 cycles. So there's 2 debt tranches outstanding that you'll see on the far left under the gray header before defeasance. There's $30.7 million, which was from the April 2016 referendum. And then there's $8.325 million, which has been refunded, but the majority of that is from the November of 2006 referendum. The majority of that was for the expansion of the high school to accommodate ninth grade back in 2006. So you'll notice the green there, so that's the callable debt. So on the left side of the 30.7 million, you'll notice that the debt isn't callable until April 1st, 2026. So we're still about 2 years away from that call feature, so that's why the defeasance is part of the discussion here today. When we get to the far right, under the blue column, you'll see that we're going to begin to eliminate some principal and therefore some interest, and I'll talk about how the savings is created. So two things are happening over on the right. Number one is that to take into consideration some of the strategies that were being talked about earlier and how the funding source with Fund 80 might come together, the yellow boxes eliminate the principal payments for 25. So really what we would be doing is taking a holiday from a levy this fall for debt service by paying off the principal associated with the 25 calendar year or the 24-25 school year. So you'll see that that's a reduction of just about $2 million of principal that would be a part of the defeasance transaction. The remaining resources, which are roughly $9 to $10 million, would then target your longest maturities. So you'll notice that 2036, 2035, and 2034 all are eliminated. So it would reduce the overall amortization from an original 20 years down to 17 years. And then there's a little bit left over that we would pay off a portion of 2033. You'll see that that reduces from 2.695 million down to 1,390,000. If you go to the far right, getting to kind of the crux or the finality of this, you'll see that what a defeasance does is it creates annual interest expense savings. And you can see it most evident in the years where we're not paying off principal. So by executing the defeasance, we're saving roughly $326,781 per year. And that's really associated with a lot of those long-term maturities. In totality, as David alluded to earlier, the execution of this defeasance plan would save $3.3 million in interest expense over the life of the remaining repayment. Now, of course, that's not static, and there is potential for early payment of debt in the future, but just simply today, you would be avoiding $3.3 million of interest expense, which unfortunately cannot be returned to the classroom because, again, it's encapsulated in debt repayment. It would be reduction in your principal and interest levy required on an annual basis by roughly that $325,000. You can see in the lower left how the numbers kind of come together. So it would be using about $12 million of equity, and you can see the estimated cost of the defeasance, which I highlighted earlier as well on that page, kind of coming together. I'm going to press pause real quick right there to see if there's any questions on kind of that plan and how it rolls out and fits together with what you guys have already talked about.
Yeah, I think an additional point for the board especially, but anybody listening as well, is the reduction in principal as well. I forgot to include that in my talking point. So it's 3.3 million in interest savings, but you're also reducing the principal by 2 million over the life of the loan. So this is past.
Rich?
Oh, is that correct?
Yeah, I didn't want to, you can see those numbers right there, David. It's actually roughly, it's over $12 million. So on the far right, under each column of your debt tranche, you'll see a little bolded footnote of the principal reduction for each of the different prepayments. So it's $10,360,000 for the $30 million that would be reduced in future principal payments, and $1,670,000 that would be reduced from the 2006 referendum debt. Didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure that we clarified that.
Yep, I got it from our previous meeting. So there's a lot of big wins here, but one thing that was also mentioned is we can't like shift money or savings into Fund 10. Like you can't do that. It's not legal. Just
Right.
to be clear, from PMA and the lawyers and all these sorts of things, we just can't do that. It would be great if we could, we just can't. So that's a really important point. I know you kind of hit on that a little bit, but that maybe that most certainly will be asked. But but there's other things we can do, which is the reason all of these things at one time.
Okay. no other questions on that, so Eric, do you wanna head to the next slide, then going back to our graph that we previously discussed? The overall levy.
Yep, so on this slide, what we're looking at is they're all footnoted there. Each bar, of course, is a different fund. So your biggest blue bar, of course, is gonna be your general fund, which probably not lost on anyone in the room, isn't necessarily always large enough because state funding is always a topic of conversation in every district that presents it. But that represents the general operation levy, which annually is your largest. You'll see from 23-24 backwards to 2020-2021, the next largest is kind of the oranges, which is your debt service. So that's the debt principal and interest levy that is set aside for paying your required principal and interest. And then again, in 22-23 and 23-24, with the idea of smoothing out your levy and taking advantage of some increases in state funding and some other opportunity, you're able to levy a little bit more, which was what we were talking about. So by implementing this plan and kind of going back to some of the comments David made, we can't necessarily shift the orange to the blue, right? That's just impossible, as you see there. But you do have a distinct opportunity as it relates to the strategy for your CED and rec program to kind of shift the burden from a tax perspective from the red and create the green, because you do have full flexibility in your community service fund. So just kind of bringing it together when we think very holistically, and this was the culmination of quite a few meetings between Caitlin, myself, and Matt, kind of fitting some of the pieces together. And just graphically speaking, you can kind of see that you're able to be strategic with some of the resources you have to prepay your debt early, create a very good story of paying off $12 million of principal early, saving over $3 million of long-term interest for a nice story, as well as having the ability to have this discussion as it relates to your Fund 80 levy and how it may be able to support some of the strategies that you've been talking about this evening.
So just again, to kind of recap some of those key points from the debt defeasance and how it pairs with the rest of our conversation tonight is that we see an interest savings to our taxpayers of over $3.3 million. So that was like that bottom right number on that defeasance page that we looked at. So those are interest payments that we wouldn't have to make by prepaying or defeasing this debt. And we maintain that steady, predictable tax rate while also enhancing the community benefit and community ed and rec facilities. What a defeasance is simply us paying down debt more quickly than the original amortization schedule, which shows the district and the board's long-term planning and financial efficiency. And then also the piece about no new debt is created. So we're ultimately just using our levy capacity that is freed up through the debt defeasance to fund the Fund 80 project. So that's why the timing, again, like why such a big deal? Like all these pieces fit together very nicely when you look at that graph that we've looked at a number of times tonight. So moving into some of the finality of our presentation tonight, and again, stop with any questions, so we'll keep it moving and we'll have another chance for questions at the very end. Tonight is the first presentation within our board finance committee of this large topic or multiple topics, and we'll do this presentation again with the full board on April 22nd. So all the information on our website, Community Ed and Rec website, will go public tonight. We'll have that press release tomorrow morning. Riverside's PTO will be informed in a separate meeting with specific like question and answer time for that group of parents tomorrow night. And then May 13th would be the board action on these large items. So it would be the CE and Rec and Riverside Facilities Projects approval and the Fund 39 defeasance approval. So that would all be set for May 13th.
Are you speaking now with the Van Franklin?
There, we have combined details, so there, yes.
Thank you.
So finally, recapping some of those key points from the entire presentation, the CE and Rec facility opportunities expands opportunities for our community and creates an ease of access with all of our facilities for CE and Rec programming on one level. Riverside's growth, we've seen the enrollment projections coming in and supports those larger class sizes coming in. We're really capped currently at space within that building. It creates that separate and secure facility between Riverside and Community Ed and Rec by no longer having students and community members passing the same hallway during the day. Fund 39 defeasance saves taxpayers over 3.3 million in interest and creates room in the overall levy to fund the community ed and rec project. At the same time, creating no new debt as the Fund 80 for the CE and rec project is funded through Fund 80 over 2 years within the levy that's been shown. And at the same time, the mill rate continues to drop over those years as well. Any other questions?
Great job, Caitlin. Great job.
It's a team effort, really is.
And the defeasance rates right now, I mean, how long are those good?
Eric, do you wanna talk defeasance rates and the timing and why the pre-June 30? Et cetera?
Yeah, so a couple things. If I don't answer your question correctly, you can just jump right in and cut me off. But when those funds are deposited in escrow, they are invested. And they're invested at US Treasury or something called a state and local government security. And if you pay any attention to what's going on, the Fed obviously has higher interest rates on the earning side. So it's able to earn enough where it's paying your interest payments until the call date. So how you're able to deposit $12 million and pay off $12 million of principal, it's making those interest earnings. So it's roughly, you're capped, unfortunately. You probably could earn 4.5%, 5% right now. But because of a term called arbitrage, not trying to get too far into the weeds, you're not able to earn more in that escrow than what your interest rates are in the debt you're paying. It's basically the way to think about it. So you're kind of capped at what you're able to earn in there. But it's still eloquent enough in this environment where it's able to mature and have pretty much all of the deposit available to pay off principal at that point in time. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Perfect.
So you cannot put in less than your principal and have that additional interest rate actually make up the principal portion, not just interest?
Ask that question again?
Well, like instead of putting 12 million in, can you put like 11.5 and find something that earns 5%? And so it pays not only the interest, but it's actually paying for some of the principal, or is that basically what the term arbitrage is?
That is the term arbitrage, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as we're looking at our overall budget, is the 12 million already planned for in our budget to be able to be accounted for?
Yes, yep, that's part of the cash flow calculations.
We even have a little time to get ready for the board meeting.
All right, well, I have nothing else. Thank you, everybody, for the questions, for the participation, really good discussion. Send any questions any of our ways, my way, David, Matt's way, we will be happy to answer.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alright, do we need a motion? I think we need a motion.
We need a motion.
Okay, so that would conclude our meeting, and so just, if we could just get a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, motion by Ms. Dews, seconded by Shelley Holzman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.